So I've I read this book a little while ago and reviewed it on the UKASFP bookshelf. And then in true solution focused practice fashion, I just think it's great to be able to network with people. So I reached out to Anne Marie and asked whether she would be interested in having a conversation with. And I'm really not a chat show host, so this is kind of quite a big thing for me to be sitting with such esteemed solution-focused practitioners. And I was just, that's my doorbell gone, but I just wanted to start by asking Anne Marie and Jacqui, I don't know who wants to take this question, a little bit about the inspiration behind the book that you co-created.
Yeah, I think that I mean, about the book was, it all started with how we got in contact with each other, Jacqui and I. And that was due to my role in EBTA at that time, and a request from our colleagues in the Solution Focus Association in Russia. And they were seeking some help, some trainers, some facilitators that were willing to offer some free workshops on trauma. And at the time, I knew that Jacqui was an excellent practitioner in the work of trauma. So I reached out to her, and that was actually how we met. And that led to a long session of online coffee chats, talking about, trying to learn and discover each other, and talking about how was my life, how was Jacqui's life. And into these kinds of conversations, we talked about our roles as mothers or daughters of elderly mothers, and that is how this woman perspective kind of came up, and of course within the solution focus approach, it was we suddenly both were realized that, well, why is nobody talking about solution-focused practitioner that are females that are doing amazingly work? So that is how the ideas and the inspiration came. I think also because the contributors in the book, half of them I knew and half of them Jacqui knew. So we were both in contact with so many brilliant female practitioners, and we really wanted to share their stories and how they have integrated the solution focus approach. And yeah, that was just a nice way of framing this book in a sense.
I got an email, Susannah, from the Danish Solution Focused Institute. Of course, I'd heard of Anne Marie Wulf, never met her. So when she asked if I'd help the Ukrainian and Russian colleagues, I said yes. But being a true South African, I grabbed that as it was hot, and I asked her, can't we also just meet up on Zoom? And Anne Marie and I, and all the contributors, I mean, we wrote the book on Zoom, and I only met Anne Marie face to face when we were finished, when we actually sat down to write the last chapter together. So by the time chapter 18 came to existence, I'd never met Anne Marie in real time.
So that's so what surprised you about each other when you first met one another in that, face-to-face meeting?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. I mean, I think we got to know each other during all these Zoom sessions, because I decided to go to South Africa and Johannesburg. And I mean, that's quite a chance if you don't have a slightest clue about that. It's going to be some nice 2 weeks in Johannesburg with a woman that you actually never met face to face. But we had a good contact, Jacqui and I, and we had laughter, and we always had a lot of laughter together. And fun moments. And I mean, so meeting Jacqui, it was just a thrill. I love her from the moment we met.
And we laughed so much on Zoom. We'd have a Zoom catch up and the screen would open up, and here's Anne-Marie sitting knitting, right? And she's knitting, and I'm like, what are you doing? And she's knitting. And we had so many giggles. And what really surprised me is that we had even more in real life. And to this day, it's just the most welcoming, fun space. Anne-Marie is my friend for life.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an accolade, Anne-Marie.
Sorry?
What an accolade.
Was it what?
What an accolade.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, we got so many ideas. We got so many projects. And I also think, we now, because we have been together not only around work topics, but also on holidays. Now we're just close friends and know each other very well, and that gives like a nice. I sometimes I think Jacqui is the sister I never had.
Yep.
Mm.
Right, can I go back to pick up on something that you mentioned about, Anne-Marie, you knew half of the contributors and Jacqui the other half. So, you brought people together that you knew. Were there any voices or experiences that you would have liked to have included but didn't?
I think, in hindsight, yes, of course. I would like to write 3 more of these books and add so many more wonderful, incredible women working quietly on their own, doing incredible work in fantastic ways. So, of course, there are voices I'd love to share and to have included. Our choice or our reason for writing was we decided we're going to make these unknown voices known. We know incredible women doing just the most amazing things, and we're going to make unknown voices known.
Yeah. So of course that led to that there were some women that already were well known, and that wasn't the women that we wanted to step forward in the book. We knew that a lot of women were working sort of behind the lines and was really doing tremendous work. And we want to share their stories, their way of working. And if you read the book, they also contribute to quite personal stories, some of them, about their childhood. And that just brings such a personal layer to the books and these stories also. So I think it was a deliberate choice to make unknown voices known, which led to that the very well-known voices, they were already there.
No, they're not to be offended. No.
No,
Um,
I hope not.
No. When I was reading it, that very first question you ask about the influence of gender on on the work of on SF, and I just wondered about how you chose. I don't know whether everybody has read the book, but how you chose those 8 questions. So those of you who haven't read the book, that Anne-Marie and Jacqui posed each contributor 8 questions, which they all responded to, and that created each chapter. Yeah, so I'm just curious to know, what was your starting list and how did you whittle it down to 8?
These questions,
Sorry.
and I'm so glad one of the contributors is online with us, because the questions just came up kind of organically, let's think, what would we like to know about these wonderful women? However, in Spain, at the EBTA conference, we had 6 women, and we presented a plenary called Ripples of Hope, where we were just reflecting on the questions, and we realized they were really hard questions to answer, really hard questions. Anne-Marie and I, look at Zibber's face. We were just, how does your gender influence? Tell us about, what is your good reason for being a solution-focused practitioner? What would others notice you doing? But the contributors and the authors told us it took a lot of thinking and a lot of introspection and reflection to write their chapters.
Yeah.
But sorry, Anne-Marie.
Can I add something to it? We are trying in the first and the last chapter to answer some of the questions ourselves, but when they became too difficult, we just skipped them because there were some of these questions that were really, really hard and were like third person's perspective. What would others see you be doing? We were quite determined to have an exercise, because it should be something that we could share all together, that was kind of hands-on and go out and do in practice. So there was some of these topics around some of the questions that we were, from the very beginning, that we were quite deliberate, choose to formulate a question around. But so that is the organic process I think you described, Jacqui, how these questions came up. But yeah, it is, we realize how tough a question it is to answer. How have your gender influence the way that you work or do solution-focused work?
And Susannah, some of the contributors really challenged us on that question, on the gender question. And for Anne-Marie and I, this was quite a learning curve as well, and quite a process of reflection of why did we actually ask a question about gender? It started off, we were women, we're all women sitting doing this. We wanted to hear what other women were doing. But how does gender actually make a difference? So we had quite a lot of people challenge us.
Yeah,
it's a very difficult question to answer, I think. And I think, when I was reading, I was mulling over the idea about, if it was asked to a man, how would they answer? And also, in the world where AI is now being used to generate questions that could be used within solution-focused bots, that's a completely supposedly gender neutral, but I guess it's got to be programmed at some level. Zibeth, may I bring you in here now? Because it seems like a good question, given the fact that you were one of the contributors.
Sure.
Would that be okay?
Yeah.
So for you, when you were presented with these 8 questions, what was the impact of that on you?
Well, first, I think initially when Jacqui approached me and asked if I wanted to contribute to the book, I was a bit overwhelmed. And I think initially they sent a different list of questions, if I remember. Kind of the idea initially had some other questions, and then they refined the questions eventually. And I think, it took a lot of reflecting. You don't think every day about how your gender influences your practice in every day. I think for me, maybe on some level I have thought about it, because I don't work in private practice. So I work mostly in a male-dominated environment. So I think it does come up. You are a female working in a maximum security male prison. Most of your colleagues are male. So I think at some level you have considered that, but maybe not therapeutically, but more just being a woman in that space. So I think the question actually made me reflect a little bit more deeper in terms of how does it actually influence, the way I practice within that space. And maybe also, how people would see a female in that space, how people experience a female in therapy in that space. So it was very interesting. It took a lot of reflecting because besides the difficult questions, they also limited the words that we could use. So we also could not just talk about everything that we wanted to. So you really had to thought about what was the most important thing that you wanted to get across in answering that question in basically 1 or 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, and how did you, what helped you to do that process? To, when you're sitting with those challenging questions, what were the things that helped you to kind of clarify in your head what you really wanted to say?
Well, initially I just wrote down everything. So I just ended up with something over 20 pages. And then from there on, I sat and I said, okay, what can I compact? What can I discuss together? I also then, after I've whittled down what I could, I've sent it to one of my very good solution focused colleagues and friends, and I asked her to also just look at what I wrote and maybe say what I can take out, where I can shave a bit down. So it was a long process, but initially I just wrote down everything. I just wrote down everything that came to mind. I also didn't write anything in order. So as it came to mind, I wrote it down, and then later I tried to make sense of everything that I wrote underneath that heading. So I didn't initially just write to answer the question. I just wrote all the thoughts that came.
And when you reformulated this download of all the things that came up in your head over the course of time, and were able to sort it within those 8 questions, which of the 8 questions did you feel, did you most enjoy responding to?
I think what I really enjoyed was the last 2. What our hopes was for, other female solution practitioners, and then also kind of your experience of writing that chapter. Because I think you learn a lot about yourself, about the work that you've done. I think in my part, I also said initially, I think this Jacqui and Anne-Marie approached us just after COVID or towards the end of COVID. So I think like most other places, everything in those 2 or 3 years went into survival mode. So you kind of get sidetracked from what your real passion was. And, we just tried to contain everything. And reflecting back on it, so I really enjoyed that reflecting part because it helped me remind me what I really enjoy about the practice, about solution focus, about my work. And it helped me actually get back into therapy as opposed to just containing and responding to anxiety and trauma and everything else that was going on in the world the couple of years that we had just been through.
That is just lovely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because
It's a pleasure, Anne-Marie.
yeah, that is just lovely to, for Jacqui and I to hear, the impact these questions have had is so lovely, because it is beyond what we ever thought about with these questions. And now you're talking about your work life, and at the EBTA conference in Tenerife, others were talking about their family life and their daughters and how they shared story with their daughters. And it's just really a truly lovely feedback to have. So thank you.
So, I know that the connection initially came from Anne-Marie and Jacqui, and, Anne-Marie, you became known as Elizabeth through Jacqui. So, Beth, have you expanded your network of solution-focused practitioners? Have you formed any alliances or connections with some of the other collaborators or contributors within the book?
I have spoken to 1 or 2 of them. We haven't actively done much. I've been a bit busy with everything that's been going on. For quite a while at work, I was the only psychologist, so I was a bit preoccupied. But I think I've wanted to attend some of the workshops, but the dates didn't work out. But I do think we had an online chat one of the days, a Zoom call with everybody, and it was so fantastic to hear everybody's stories. The one other author is also close to me in Cape Town. So the idea is that during this year that I want to connect with her as well. But yeah, I think just in general, that call that we had and just hearing everybody's stories was also so inspiring. And yeah, making a space for everybody. I think it's just, the incredible work that women is doing across the country.
Yeah, I mean, I was really struck by some of the stories that I read. Some resonated more with me than others. And when I was talking with Abby, we had one particular contributor who used language which we just thought was amazing. I mean, everybody was the stories, but Rebecca Ure in America, and her kind of the I can't even remember it, that she uses red and green flags, but about reversible changes when you're talking about people who are choosing or considering going through transitioning to another sex. And it was just that those kind of conversations, I just thought it was just brilliant what she had written, and just extraordinary, the work that she does. And I just wondered, if you were going to consider a second volume of your book. So you've said you've got 3. You said you've got at least 3 more books up your sleeve, Jacqui.
At least.
At least, yes.
It's very scary Zooming with Anne-Marie, because the ideas go and go. And then when you end the Zoom call, you've got so much work and you don't know where to stop.
Yeah.
So do you have different roles and responsibilities in that? If I was a fly on the wall, watching the process that was happening in these Zoom meetings, who would be taking on, who would be bringing what to each meeting?
Yeah, I don't think we have different roles, but probably if other people were trying to analyze us, they might find out we had. But from the very beginning, we have recorded our Zoom meetings. And that has just been nice to look back to whatever we talked about and the ideas that we have popped up. And I also want to add what you just said, Sibit, that we created a WhatsApp group for all the contributors to share. And so we wanted to expand the network from not only for us, but for each and everyone that contribute to the book. Of course, it's maybe obvious, but we've been asked a couple of times, so when are you writing men's perspective? And as I normally say, I'm just sorry, guys, we're not going to do it. And the one reason is it's not interesting. And the reason why I put it in this way is one of the foundings that Jacqui and I have had about writing this book. And that is that gender is not that big an issue as we thought it were. Gender is fluid nowadays, and we can't even talk about, a female perspective or a male perspective. It's a fluid thing. So it might be some other elements that contribute to how you do your solution-focused work, or what you bring into your work, that is quite more personal. And we also see that in the stories that are shared. So it's definitely not, the second book are not a male perspective. And as Jacqui said, we could write even a second and a third book about other women doing tremendous work. But I think what are some of this, the takeaways that we have from this book is some of the common factors that we have dived into in the end of the book, and that we presented also at the Dubai conference last year. This is looking into what are all women saying that they are doing. What are the common factors, both in your personal life, in your professional life, and on a societal level. And I think that make us curious. So I think that's something that we're going to, I know we're diving a bit more into it right now.
So it's watch this space.
Mm.
Can you tell us any more, Jacqui?
I think if you were a fly on the wall, you would notice that Anne-Marie is really good at organizing Google Doc files, which I really am not. First of all, I can't find Google Docs. Then when I find it, I'm all over the place. So Anne-Marie is really good at organizing and keeping things extremely neat and tidy. What really stood out for Anne-Marie and I in the process, right, was the honesty of the contributors, the humbleness and deep willingness to share. I mean, nobody said no, not from Yvonne Dolan to Eve Lipchik, who wrote the foreword. Nobody said no. And I must be honest, this was very overwhelming for me. I felt extremely humbled and, you know, just so amazed how everybody was eager and willing and shared with incredible compassion and love, really, and care. So that nobody ever said no really surprised me. And when we got to Tenerife in September and I met some of the women in person, you know, it's a personal journey to edit their work. And then what Anne-Marie and I did after every chapter, we'd meet up. Anne-Marie would have read the chapter, I would have read the chapter, and then we had an hour to an hour and a half Zoom meeting where we'd reflect with each other what this chapter gave us, what it reminds us of, and that's how we built those reflective endings to each chapter. So it's very personal. And when I finally met some of the women in Spain, I don't think, other than childbirth, I've ever been that emotional. It really hit me so on such an emotional, deep space, because it just felt like, I know this is going to sound pretty, I don't know what it's going to sound like, Susannah. I'm just going to say it. It just felt like such an incredibly safe belonging, you know. It felt like a place where you belong. And that was quite amazing for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I don't know whether that's the solution focused world or,
exactly,
you know, but I've felt that, you know, I'm past my middle age now, and you know, in terms of finding one's tribe, or, you know, when that for me is, you know, I was saying that I, you know, chaired the conference in Oxford, and walking into the atrium of the meeting, it just felt this amazing connection and love for people. And I think it's very special. That I don't know what it is about a bunch of solution focused. We ought to have a common noun. What is it? The collective noun of solution focused practitioners. We should find a something that would be a good descriptor. But can I go back? Can I go back to you mentioning about this? You know, at the end of the book, you were talking about some of the themes and the connections and the societal, you know, things that you were considering on a societal level. If you were going to go back to all the contributors and ask them another question based on that, the impact that they, maybe something around the societal level that they're working at, what question might you choose to ask all the contributors? So the ninth question that they don't know about yet.
I mean, I would be curious. I mean, these contributors are so competent, so skillful. I mean, they know everything. So I would love to ask them, how could or what or how could we spread the solution-focused approach even more on a societal level, in larger scales. One of the contributors, Sofia Geisler from Mexico, she managed to have an impact on the whole justice system in Mexico City. So ideas and reflections into how could we take the solution-focused approach, and with the solution-focused approach, I mean the assumptions, the ideas, the way that we approach each other, and how could we take that even further out in society?
I agree with you, Anne-Marie, because something that stood out for me is that in some way, all the contributors were nearly activists, women doing things, most of them pretty much on their own, right? Just doing their own thing on their own, no big companies supporting them, or just out there really making a difference to human rights, people's lives, wellness, really standing up and stepping forward. Yet most doing it on their own. And I would like to know how can we collaborate more and share more so that we do it even more on a societal level.
Yeah.
Ladies, I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I would like to hand it over to the floor. You are the floor, people. So giving you a bit of a heads up to think about.
Get your questions ready.
Well, yeah, and I just, it's always like, oh, what can I think of? But I would like you, there must be things that I haven't asked that you would like to ask. And, it's such a wonderful opportunity to have both Anne-Marie and Jacqui and Elizabeth in the same room together. So I suppose the last question I wanted to ask was in terms of your hope for readers of your book. What were your hopes, or what are your hopes about the takeaways from reading the collection of voices and experiences that you I don't know, curated?
It's on so many levels, actually, I think. So I would love if the book led to that other women were inspired to write a book about how, so even more female authors that step forward and shared about how their perspectives and practice are on the solution-focused approach. That is one thing that I hope for. Another thing is, it's a couple of weeks ago, I got this lovely mail from one of our solution-focused colleagues in Canada, and she wrote me hashtag SFWWW. And by that, she meant solution-focused Wonder Women. And, so this kind of female community supporting each other in writing books and stepping forward in making key speaks, I think that would be lovely. And I'm not saying that because, I'm just a truly feminist, but I've been in the solution-focused approach for decades, and I'm missing some voices.
And for me, Susannah, I told Tim just before we started today, my task was to find references to our ideas in chapter 1. And I worked so hard, and I found I went into my study, took out all the books, and I wrote chapter 1 with the references, but I did not feel comfortable. And I could not figure out what was going on because I'd worked hard, we'd done well. Why am I so uncomfortable? And realized that all my references that I'd used were solution-focused books written by men. And the title is Women's Perspective. So what are you doing, Jacqui? So put all those books to the side because they're brilliant books, they're fabulous, fantastic, but then went back to my bookshelf and started taking out books written by women and rewrote chapter 1. And Susannah, it was a totally different chapter. It was written softer somehow. There was so much more to the chapter. And my hope is that these voices be heard, that we hear these voices, that we read that softer touch that is there.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you. I hope those questions were helpful for you to be able to share your the experiences and process that you've been through. Audience, floor, whatever you like to call yourselves, would any of you like to ask Anne-Marie, Jacqui, or Elizabeth a question or questions? Or if you don't want to put your Beverly.
I really wanted to reflect on what Jacqui just said, which to do with the common factors, which when I've reflected on women's contributions, and I did do a little interview with Adam a long time ago. Adam Froer interviewed me and a couple other women about what we thought about women's contribution. And I used you, Jacqui, a lot because maybe this is too black and white, but I feel like the Occam's razor took the softness out of just talking to people. Eve Lipchik has talked about that. And so we talked about the fact that, especially when I heard you, Jacqui, doing therapy for the first time, I just, I've been in the solution-focused world for about 30 years as well, but didn't really, it's become much more online, so you can listen to way more people. I didn't really attend tons of conferences, but the whole softness, the common factors, finding what we have in common, rather what's different. I really do think that's what women have contributed, and not the slicing and dicing to get to whatever you need to get to as quickly as possible. So I
Thank you, Bev. And Anne-Marie and I wanted a softer touch in the title, but Routledge said to us, if you Google soft touch, you might get to other sites that is not linked to therapy. So that was taken out. But for me, just that rewrite, the words Eve Lipchik, for example, uses, the words, they're different. The chapter turned out differently. There was a different, I don't want to say depth, because it's not about depth. It's just different.
And it's a good difference.
And it's a difference that needs to be heard more. It's a difference that needs to be out there more. It's not, I feel it's not just a difference we do behind our closed doors when we're in practice. We need to speak about those differences. We need to, when I read Ursula Bielmann's chapter, I felt, oh my word, I'm not alone. Because sometimes, what you read and what you sometimes even teach isn't what you do. And this book has given me permission to teach what I do as well.
Well, I think Eve once said that she watched when she was training at MRI, some of the men that teach, and then she watched what they did, and they were not the same thing at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And I
Thank
think there's been, just to add on, I think there's been, maybe a tendency, but to get descriptions of interactions between people. And every time that somebody stated something about what they were thinking or feeling. It was translated out to what would others see you be doing, or how would that look like, suppose and I remember somebody writing or saying something, well, between the thinking and the action is the feeling. And it's just for a long period not been okay to integrate feelings in the solution-focused work. I mean, for some it has, and Eve wrote lovely about it. I think what also inspired us was we came across this book, Move to Tears, Move to Action, which is a little gem that we just discovered, was written by Jane Letham, and she was the first actually that wrote about the lens of gender, and that was just nice to have this kind of backtrack, that there was somebody else that have had these ideas or have this thoughts and reflections about gender in the solution-focused approach. Yeah.
Sounds like potentially there's a good research project there, isn't there, about microanalysis of men versus women in terms of the
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I've been doing a lot of microanalysis. Yeah, I'm not sure, but
who knows?
yeah, maybe.
Thank you, Bev. Other questions, please.
Gracie, have you unmuted yourself to ask a question?
No.
I will come up with one, but not yet.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah.
Alex?
Hi there. I just wondered, given the fact that we're all here together, whether we could help with any sectors or countries, whether any of us had contacts in places that you would like to have included or would like to get into. Maybe not for now, but maybe through Susannah in the future.
For me personally, it was India. There's so much incredible solution-focused work happening in India. And we yeah. And prior to Anne-Marie and I going to Dubai, my world hadn't stretched to India, and to hear what these incredible women in India are doing, because such wonderful work happening in India. So that, for me, that's a space that I think unknown voices really need to become more known, and we need to hear their voices, because
Yeah, and not only India, but parts of the Middle East, where they've been doing really, really great work. I think we have Julia from China, but it would have actually been very, very difficult for us to reconnect with her. So I think, and I know from other people that have been doing training in China, there's a lot of work going on in China as well. And I know of the Philippines, and yeah, so there's part of Asia that I think we didn't cover maybe sufficient, or yeah.
I just want to make a plug for the 24-hour conference that I'm involved in, that you might want to look at who's presenting, because there's a woman named Indu from India and from Kerala, and she's going to be presenting about all the work that they're doing in community health. I heard her in Amsterdam, and if you check out the program, which will come out soon, you'll find people from all over the world.
awesome.
And you can check out some women that are doing things that you may not have heard of from, like I said, from Asia, even maybe some South Africa. There are some women from Iran that we're going to be presenting. I'm not sure whether it will work out, but I just want to make a plug for the conference on May 2nd. So check out the program. You can attend for 24 hours and in your own continent, and you can stretch into North America. It ends with North America, which is midnight for Europe time zone.
Yeah.
It's always confusing, the time zones. I live on the West Coast. I'm trying to plan a conference that only uses the East Coast time, so it's always very challenging.
Yeah.
Thank you, Beverly.
Yeah.
Susannah, may I ask a question?
Please do.
I'm just wondering if anybody here this evening has maybe read the book or even just a chapter, and what impact, it made on them reading a woman's perspective book. Anne-Marie and I got such an incredible reflection from a reader that neither Anne-Marie nor I ever thought it would have that deep reach or effect on people. So just wondering if anybody has any reflection on reading a chapter or maybe the book. Susannah, maybe you can tell us, because you
Yeah, I mean, I read it in its entirety, and I've read it more than, parts of it more than once. I think it's extraordinary. It really was about growing my own knowledge about where solution focus can be used. As you say, within the political context of Mexico, her story was extraordinary. And the news that we receive here in England about life in Mexico is often probably quite challenging in terms of drug cartels, and he talks about handling all the challenges of working within the political system. So that was eye-opening. So I suppose it was an eye-opening book for me, but it also, the questions I also did stop to try and think about how I would answer them too. So yes, it's certainly something that has brought another layer in my millefeuille of solution-focused practice. So yeah, I would recommend it to people.
Anne, did you have your hand up?
Oh, you have to ask a question now, Anne.
I was just thinking. No, I haven't read it. I'm afraid I haven't, but I've been inspired to read it now from this meeting. Yeah, it's something I'd never even thought about before, about women's perspective. So yeah, I will read it. And thank you for doing it, because it will be so interesting.
Yeah. Nice.
Anybody else? No. Well, if the clock is ticking, it's like the door is closing, people.
So maybe I could just make a comment, Susannah, if that's okay. I'm really, really impressed with what I've heard, and it's been a great conversation. And I think one of the things that really strikes me from a conversation, and Susannah, it's a conversation that we've had, is about the importance of SF literature and the culture around writing. It's so profound. The practice is important, the training is important, the conferences, but I also found through this seminar in particular, and some of the other ones that we've done, the whole process of writing, not just the person sat in the room writing, that itself is hugely important, because it means people have to reflect on their practice and distill it into a communicable form to share with the world. But hearing about the networking that you involved and the way this book was put together through a series of interviews and the relationships that formed through those interviews and how people got to know each other and relate to each other in quite a profound way. It strikes me that the culture around the SF literature is like a really, really important part of the SF world. Not only the writing of the book, but also the impact. It sounds like this book in particular is going to have significant impact. It's certainly had impact in the context of this webinar. So again, you know, brilliant to hear. And I know one of the things that Jacqui and Anne-Marie mentioned before was about encouraging other people to consider writing. And you know, we know the benefit of journaling, for example, and it's a sort of an extension of that, if you like, isn't it? Yeah. With the addition that it has potential huge influence, and we all have books on our bookshelf. I'd forgotten that I had Jane Leatham's book many years ago, so I knew that one, and of course I've read Lipchik and Linda Metcalf and Insa Boone and a number of those, and we have our favourite books, don't we? So one of the questions is like, which is the book that's most influenced you? Which is the book that either you'd give, the single book you recommend, or if your house is on fire, you could only save one book off your shelf. Which might it be?
Are you asking that of Anne-Marie and Jacqui?
I'm asking that of anybody who wishes to answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's Eve Lipchik's Beyond Technique. If I had to run and grab a book on solution focus that I would love to treasure and keep and hold, it would be Beyond Technique.
Yeah, it's such a lovely book. I agree with you. And yeah, we really looked into female authors, female researchers that could what's it called in English? That could contribute to the book. And of course some of them are well known, and then some new pop up, like this one with Jane Latham. And yeah, I think it's difficult for me. It's difficult definitely to just pick one book because they contribute with so many different things. But what I would like to say, if anybody is considering writing a book, anytime I would support, or if I can be useful in any way, yeah, people can just reach out. And it's not like we're totally experienced in writing books. We just jumped into it, and it was so nice just to have a partner in this that we could share with. I mean, if it was going to be a flop or rejected, then we were too into this. And that was just so nice.
Exactly. It was about, I felt the doing it together so incredible. And as two editors, and then to have so many wonderful contributors, but the journey of putting it together, writing the proposal, thinking about the 8 questions to make it a structure, and having a partner that sat with you, and that was just the biggest gift, and I can highly recommend that.
Thank you. That sounds like a really good place to finish. And just thank you very much indeed. So thank you. Just a little round of applause to our
Thank you.
speakers and our guests. Thank you.